He's very strange, just generally speaking. We are now joined, folks, by Dr. Osbill Watson of the Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Agriculture and Fisheries, and Dr. Alison Nicholson of the Microbiology Department at the University of the West Indies. And we're talking about the dangers of antibiotic misuse. I think more than that, actually, a range of other topics as we look at, what are we celebrating now? World Antibiotic Awareness Week, which is the 11th to the 16th of November. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Thank you for being here. So let me start with, I'm going to go with ladies first, Dr. Osbill.
Sure.
Dr. Osbill Orlando. Dr. Nicholson, tell me what's going on with human beings and antibiotics these days. Why are we, well, I understand that we've built up a bit of resistance and aren't responding as we used to. What is the cause of that?
Okay, so there are many causes, and these include taking antibiotics when you don't need them. For example, having a cold, probably a little fever at the beginning, and pressuring your doctor to give you antibiotics when it may be totally unnecessary.
Pressuring your doctor?
Yes, that happens.
So
we did a survey, and a certain percentage of patients will admit to pressuring their doctors. Now, out of the percentage that would pressure their doctors, a small percentage might get through. Most of them will probably not. But the point is, don't pressure your doctor for
So what happens is that your body is building up an immunity?
Okay, no, it's not your body that actually gets resistant. It's the bug, the germ, the bacteria. Oh. So the antibiotic resistance is actually referring to the bacteria. So the bacteria will now become resistant because you're using these antibiotics, so they'll learn the tricks of how the antibiotics work. Then they become resistant. Then when you get an infection with the resistant bacteria, then you can't be treated because the antibiotics that used to kill the bacteria can no longer work. So the antibiotic resistance is talking about the germ, and then the problem that we have is what happens when we get an infection from that resistant germ.
I see.
I don't get past pressuring the doctor yet. But don't the doctor know what I need, so no matter how
So have you ever done that?
No, but I mean, even if I do, would the doctor not know that you
and
don't need
that's
this?
what the survey showed. The survey actually showed that of those who would ask, only a small percentage do get. So most of the doctors will say no.
But the ones who don't say no, that's not good doctoring.
Well, yeah, maybe this program might challenge.
That's why we have an opioid crisis, because there are doctors who know their patients well enough to say, all right, we'll write you a prescription for this when you don't really need it. So that's another issue.
That's another issue.
For another discussion.
So what is the problem now with the, as you said, it's the bacteria that, so it just won't work, period, Dr. Osbill?
Well, the challenge we face, and it is across the board, both in human health and animal health, whereby nowadays a lot of infections become so difficult to treat that doctors are having problems. So you go to the doctor, you have an illness, he or she prescribes an antibiotic. You take this antibiotic, you don't get better because the antibiotic is no longer working. There are certain critical illnesses which doctor will tell you about, especially in humans, like gonorrhea, etc., tuberculosis, which you find very few antibiotics that are able to treat these ailments, all because of perhaps a poor stewardship over the years in terms of how we use or misuse antibiotics. So as it relates to animals and animal health and veterinary medicine, we have been taking a different route whereby we're saying antibiotics must only be used for therapeutic purposes only.
What does that mean?
It means that if the animal is not sick, if it doesn't have a bacterial infection or so, don't use antibiotics. There is a situation where, and especially in the developed world, whereby antibiotics were used as growth promotants. So they will be feeding these antibiotics at very low dose in the feed for the animal to be able to, you know, assimilate better and develop quicker.
Go faster.
Now, I can tell you, and we're proud of our Jamaica, that we have always been against this. And
is that like GMO? It's a
actually antibiotics in the feed. Say, for example, in terms of poultry. We have been working with our poultry industry here locally over the years, and we have always been saying to them, no antibiotics in the feed unless the birds are ill.
Okay. Because that then has an effect on us when we eat said bird,
yeah,
correct?
Exactly.
Right.
So,
okay.
So Dr. Nicholson, if what you use antibiotic for, there is no something else that can be used that will...
That's a problem we face, and that's why we are so desperate to get the message out, because we're facing a crisis in the medical field. A lot of the successes that we have had and the things that have happened, you know, things like prosthetic joint surgery, you know, heart surgery, organ transplant, etc., those have been made possible because you have antibiotics that can cover you if you have infections. With us losing antibiotics, we run the risk of taking a giant step backward in the whole field of medicine.
Does that mean that there's no cover?
Right, at this point in time. They're working on new approaches even, because the truth is, as soon as we get a new antibiotic, the same bad habits prevail and you become resistant. The thing is, organisms, bacteria will mutate. That's a part of how they grow. But they would mutate much more slowly if we didn't throw the antibiotics at them.
So you're suggesting that if I go to the doctor and she says, well, you need some antibiotic, but it's not working for me, there's nothing else that you can use?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So I just can keep that infection until...
Well, okay, so a couple other points that I wanted to squeeze in would include the fact that if you do get a course of antibiotics, you should complete them.
Exactly.
At this point,
we have
that's what we're saying.
a very bad habit here. We take half and then we start
as you feel better, you stop.
Right, right. We did a survey, and the survey also showed that a significant percentage of persons, probably over 80%, didn't share the antibiotics. You know, you get a course of antibiotics and your neighbor is having the same symptoms, and you say, well, here, take some of mine.
Sure.
So sharing antibiotics means that you would not take the complete course necessary to eradicate the organism.
Right.
And so
but do we also have just stronger strains of illnesses now? Different strains that react differently?
Well, you have them now because you have weeded out the sensitive strains, but it's not even...
That's why,
right.
Okay.
And it's not even necessarily so that the bacteria that are resistant are necessarily more powerful. They're just harder to treat because they're resistant to the
But don't
antibiotics
you have different
that you
kinds of antibiotics?
And some of them are resistant to all. I actually saw an organism growing, you know, that was resistant to 21 out of 22 antibiotics tested against it.
What illness was that for?
That was a urinary tract infection.
Oh my gosh.
Boy.
This is what we're facing. It's frightening, and this is why we have a global move. It's not just a little national move in Jamaica. This is a global move, because resistance anywhere is resistance everywhere. We have a resistant strain of Neisseria gonorrhea in Jamaica. I'm not saying we do. I said, should we have? And somebody comes down to Jamaica, they could pick up that strain,
when did
take
you
it back.
Start getting scared about this?
Oh, we have been trying to promote it for quite a while, but the global move started in about 2015-16.
Has been filed for a
In
while.
2016, the United Nations General Assembly mandated all their member countries to have a national action plan based on a global action plan template. So this is a part of what
Let me ask a stupid question here now. Say antibiotic come in 20 milligram or whatever, so you can up the dose to 40 and it works.
It doesn't work. There are probably a few occasions when increasing the dose might counteract that. And we have different things we try. Sometimes we combine two. For example, if you're in a spot where you have a patient with an organism that's very resistant, you might in the lab, from the laboratory perspective, say, okay, well, it's resistant to all of them, but it's less resistant to this, less resistant, let's combine them. Okay. But you understand, that's the kind of thing we're resorting to. That's not the ideal.
So what's the next, what are the next steps? Because it must be more than one.
Well, there are several steps, and one of them is prudent use of antimicrobials, not only antibiotics, but also your worm medicines, your antifungals, etc., because they are all involved.
So that's on us, Doc.
So all of us.
This is
all of us.
Management now.
It's all stakeholders. And some of the things we're looking at is, for example, how do we prevent having to reach that point to use an antibiotic?
Right.
So sanitation, hygiene, on the farm, proper management, biosecurity, vaccination programs so that animals and birds will be protected, so you don't have to get to the point where you need antibiotics. And also to ensure that antibiotics are prescribed appropriately, they are used appropriately, and if you get some antibiotics from your doctor or from the veterinarian, use it as prescribed, use it up to the point it was stated to be used, and then don't you ever go and give someone else some of what you got.
Yeah, sharing isn't always
sharing
caring.
is not, right.
Nice.
Right.
What happens
Yes.
this week, though? What are we doing this week for the 60th, 11th, for the
11th.
Well, there are several
11,
activities,
16,
right?
sorry,
So
yeah.
during this week, there are several activities that are
Okay.
planned. Of course, we have the launch of this week tomorrow. Then we have a symposium on Wednesday at the faculty medical
Right, at the
science.
main medical
Right,
lecture
main-
theatre on the hospital compound.
Okay.
And this is at 5 o'clock. And we're inviting everybody to come, all medical
And then
persons.
we have Agriculture Day. That's at Knox College.
Thursday.
You know, RJR will be there. I think you're two famous guys,
Yes, Berger and
right?
Markland.
And the minister will be there.
Okay.
And so we're trying to ensure that we get to as much people as possible.
Right.
And on Friday, we'll be going to St. Anne's Bay at 4 o'clock for another symposium at Amon Tree Restaurant.
Okay.
So, Dr. Nicholson, if I pressure you, give me some antibiotics.
No, sir.
Me still not get past that part. I know me still not get past that.
Well, there are cases where we hear that you can get it otherwise. And so what we say to people, get your medication from reputable, registered sources.
Yeah, but
Go
I
to a
would still want
pharmacy.
to know how I, a lay person, would know, say, I need antibiotic. I mean, if I
No,
get
but
sick,
that's
know that.
cultural almost. You know,
Yes.
persons will use the term very loosely. Sometimes they use antibiotics.
so I get
when
too
they
cough
actually
and I just say,
mean-
boy, I
right.
need some
Ex-
antibiotic.
Yes,
Exactly.
it's a generic term
Exactly.
for some persons. We're trying to
Exactly.
take it out of that realm and cause people to realize how serious it
Kind of
is.
scary, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Just
Sure.
don't
Thank you
share
for having
drugs
us.
with your neighbor, and you'll be
Chief
okay.
Veterinary Officer of the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, Dr. Osbill Orlando Watson, and Department of the Head of Microbiology at UMONA, Dr. Allison.
Well, Dr.
Patterson.
Osbill never want nobody know her middle name this morning.
And I don't know Dr. Allison middle name. Dr. Allison, where's your middle name?
She kept it very...
Another story.
Yeah, I know.
Christina.
We'll be right back, everybody.